Well, a couple things before I get started. Because it's the Christmas season, you're playing Christmas carols. I really want to get back to a time where we actually close our service with a song. I think it goes better. And we've talked about this. It just didn't get in the bulletin. We had computer problems. Tracy had computer problems this week, so the bulletin wasn't. Can we do that? At least today? Away in a Manger. How about that? We all know what the closing song is, so you can prepare yourself. Another thing, I just had some comments, and somebody was asking, I won't say names, it was Joan Ronning. She was she was wondering if there can be a rooster egg, and no, roosters don't have eggs. So, anyway. On December 17th, 1903, after numerous attempts, unsuccessful attempts, Orville and Wilbur Wright, you probably recognize those names, they were successful in getting their flying machine off of the ground, and the first flight, they now calculate, they think it lasted 12 seconds. They finally got it up, and it flew a distance. They determined that the airspeed of that first flight was 6.8 miles an hour, and it traveled a distance of 120 feet. However, that was only the first of 4 flights that the brothers made that historic day. By the fourth go-round of the day, they actually kept the plane in the air for 59 seconds and flew at a total of 852 feet. They were thrilled, as they should be. And at the end of the day, the brothers sent 2 telegrams. One they sent to their father, one they sent to their sister. And both, at different locations, took that telegram to the respected editors of the local papers. The father was turned down as the local editor didn't think it was noteworthy enough to print, and their sister took it to her local editor, who was actually her close friend. And this man read it with proper respect. Here's how it read. The telegram, we have actually flown 120 feet. We will be home for Christmas. And as the story has been handed down through the years, the editor put the paper down with a smile and replied, "How nice. The boys will be home for Christmas." Okay? Such a huge event. Flight. It was going to change the world in many ways. In a very short time, it would change even warfare. He missed it. He could have been the first to tell the world the big news, but he missed it. He focused on the wrong thing. Welcome to the Christmas season. There's no time of year when the American public focuses more on a religious holiday without them even knowing it. Whether they're focusing advertently or inadvertently, I love the fact that Christmas is the way it is. The entrance of Jesus into human history is truly amazing, but just like the editor friend who missed the amazement of mankind's first flight, I don't want us to miss out on really the bigger picture or the more important pictures of Christmas. Pictures, plural. I don't want us to miss out on the amazement of what Christmas should mean to us as believers, us who claim Him as King and as Lord of our lives. Now, I realize we have 4 weeks left in December. There's no way to cover all of the Christmas stories and all the little tangents and venues that we can have. But hopefully we can cover and maybe uncover some amazing truths and apply these truths to our everyday lives. I want to start out on the back now on the welcome table, whatever it is. I didn't get there this morning, but there is a little sheet for your use. It's either something you can grab and stuff in your Bible, or you can actually use it as homework, and it is called 44 Messianic Prophecies of Jesus. Goes along, the reason I picked Messiah, we're going to look at 4 different words, and I'll get to those before, but Messiah is one of those words that often you see with a Christmas setting. And just the idea of Messiah is one topic that we're going to look at. And so I found a list that these are 44, and it's 44 of the estimated 300. Sometimes you get 305 all the way up to 312. Actually, Tom, did you just grab them? You can hand them out if you want. Maybe somebody else, if somebody else could stand up and hand out some of them, that'd be great too. But what this is 44 prophecies of Jesus, 44 of the roughly 305 prophecies. I like looking at things from a different perspective. I love math. And the prophecies of Jesus, prophesying years ago that say he would be born of a virgin, there's a biggie, that he would be nailed on a cross. All these different prophecies, if you mathematically compile them together, some of you have probably studied statistics and maybe the bell curves and things like that, and you look at how math is run and how math works. Well, if one person could accomplish even 8 of the greatest prophecies that Jesus did, we didn't actually have that little number on our computer to put it to 10 to the 17th power. Well, just in fulfilling 8 prophecies, mathematically, if you were to do this, for one person to just complete 8 prophecies, we would be at 1 about to 10 to the 17th power, which, if you remember, let's go together. First you have the ones column, then the tens, then the hundreds, then the thousands, 10,000s. Let's go the big ones. Then you have millions, then you have billions, then you have trillions, then you have, I think the next one is quadrillions. And if just one person fulfilling 8 of those prophecies would make it about 1 odd, the odds would be 1 out of 10 to the 17th, which would be 1 to 100 quadrillion. Now, it's a number that, wow, that's too big for us to really get our hands around. Here's the story. I've heard it before. Maybe you have too. This is a comparison of what the odds would be. Many of you will remember the big Eisenhower dollars. Fairly large coin, I think one of the largest in our history. You see them now and then, but they're still in circulation a little bit, but you don't see them often. If you took one of those and you painted it red, and then you took the state of Texas. Now, the state of Texas, I have it down here somewhere. The state of Texas is 268,820 square miles. Just to let you know, the state of Minnesota, as big as the state of Minnesota is, we are at about 80,000 square miles. So Texas is about 3.5 times the square mileage of Minnesota. But if you filled the state of Texas all with Eisenhower dollars to a level of about 2 feet, and you threw that one red coin in and mixed it all around, and then you took one person anywhere in the state and you blindfolded them and said, okay, you have one chance to pick that red silver dollar. That's the odds of Jesus accomplishing 8. Now, if we go mathematically and say, what are the odds of him doing all 305 or 312, depending on which theologian you use, what are the odds of him doing that? For one person to be the anointed, the one that fulfills that, well, it ends up, it's larger than our English language could handle. And actually, from my little research, I find that the largest number the English language uses is 100 centillion, or it would be 999 centillion, which would look like a 10 to the 304th power. So I have that. That right there is 100 centillion. I don't know if that's going to be on a pop quiz of yours. It's a number that I don't think I'll ever use again, maybe in my entire life, but that's what it is. The odds of Jesus fulfilling all those prophecies would be greater than that number. And that's the largest number that our English language handles. Interesting. That's actually down here on the back. Just I threw those numbers on the back of your sheet. And the reality is, guess what? Jesus coming as Messiah. Jesus coming the way he did. Jesus accomplishing what he did. Don't ever think it was happenstance. It wasn't. It was planned out from the very beginning. Well, as you can see, 44 messianic prophecies. Messiah. A word we're very familiar with. We use it all the time. Messiah. God's anointed is what it means. Actually, it could be translated, the one God smeared. That's literally how you could take, and I better not touch it, but here's an example of something very precious. I promise, I won't hurt it. How do you clean that, by the way? Where is she? She's gone. I know that I played a trombone. Every now and then you had to clean it. I probably did less than it should have been. I couldn't stand the thing. My mom made me do it. But the idea was you had to clean things that were precious. And if you didn't clean it, guess what? It would start oxidizing or whatever it would do. But the idea of Messiah being either anointed or literally smeared, I think some of you, especially some of you fellows, can understand this. You get done deer hunting, you've carried that rifle or that shotgun around here. You've carried it out in all sorts of weather. It's rained, it's snowed. You've probably dropped it twice. You've got mud in it. What do you do before you put it in the closet for the winter? Hand it to your wife and have her clean it. Okay. The idea is, if it was a metal object, you smeared it. And so Messiah is actually, we often say, oh, it's anointed. Well, just get the understanding, the anointed, actually pouring oil, we believe that really started, it was really a figment of grace. Grace being poured over that leader or that anointed person, that political figure, that king. And smearing in the same way, if you wanted to keep a metal object or something precious, you would put oil on it so it wouldn't oxidize. They didn't know about oxidation back then, but that's exactly what they were doing.
We don't know how big this army was,
we often say that
but there's
Messiah
some
and Christ are the same
Serious.
things. Actually, they are. Messiah is more directly from the Hebrew, and Christ or Christos is from the translated to the Greek. The reality is, the Greeks even utilized the word Messiah. Messiah became part of the Greek language as well. A lot of times we hear the term Messiah more around the Christmas season, and then we hear Christ later on, especially Christ associated with Easter. There is no real reason for that. That's just tradition. They both mean the exact same things. In fact, Messiah and Christ, Messiah became part of the Greek language, and it was probably, I would compare it to maybe a southern drawl when you get somebody with that twang or that southern, slow southern talk, compared to somebody that spoke with like high, proper court English from Great Britain. Two different things. They're speaking the same language, but their words are probably going to be much, much different. That's the real difference between Messiah and Christ, because both Messiah and Christ were used in the Greek language, but Messiah was more of the aristocracy and the royalty. Christ was just your regular, oh, he's Christ, he's the anointed, he's the chosen one. Well, where do we go from here? Interestingly, when you look up this idea of Messiah, oh, that's people, the Jews anticipated Messiah would come. We hear that often, we read that often, but I was surprised this week. I'd never studied this out. Go home and get on Bible Gateway or get on whatever Bible lesson you use on your computer and try to find Messiah in the Old Testament. In the NIV, Messiah doesn't show up, the word Messiah. It shows up in the King James twice, both in Daniel chapter 9. Interesting. You see, the reality is, when we read prophecy, those Jews, they knew that somebody was coming. But realize they didn't have the pleasure of knowing how all those prophecies would be molded together. We now can look at Jesus and say, oh yeah, we can see that back there. But they didn't have the advantage that we have. And so when we talk about Messiah, and it was different than back then. They knew somebody was coming, or they hoped, they'd been promised. But boy, they didn't have nearly the understanding that we have. You see, Jesus came as a surprise to the Jews, even though they were awaiting Messiah. But who could have guessed how special he was going to be? Even though the etymology of the word doesn't include this, by the time of Jesus' life, Messiah had evolved into a word that really surrounds the military. I don't think it was intrinsically meaning military, but when you think about this, often they would talk of one was coming in the line of David. Well, who was David? Well, David was the greatest military man Israel had ever seen. He was the great king. The king that King David was the one that all other kings were really measured by. And so the idea of Jesus as Messiah, Jesus as a military leader, I can see where that would have grown. And by the time Jesus did come, that's what the Jews were expecting. But lest we get sidetracked just like the Israelites, let's make sure we focus on what Jesus desired. I've entitled this series, and it didn't make it into our bulletins, but I've entitled it The Paradox of Bethlehem. And we're going to take these 4 phrases for the 4 remaining weeks in December. We're going to look at Messiah today. Next week is Incarnate. The next week is Emmanuel, and finally, between Christmas and New Year's, we have Prince of Peace. Now, paradox. How do you define it? Paradox, a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that when investigated or explained may prove to be well-founded or true. You know, to the Jews, Jesus proved to be a paradox. He was an enigma in many ways. They had taken their own word, Messiah, and they had corrupted it to become a military leader when the word itself really only designated a king, one that was anointed, one that was chosen, maybe singled out. Something awesome, put it that way, that was going to last. Remember the smearing part. They knew that this guy, or whoever it was special enough it was going to last. Jesus was Messiah, really by both definitions. The Jews didn't understand that. He certainly was Messiah by God's definition. He was God's chosen. But he was also Messiah by their own Jewish definition. They just didn't realize it. Messiah was thought to be a ruler that would lead the Jewish people into victory. Jesus was just that, but their understanding of victory was different. Now, let's take a sidebar, kind of a timeout on this. I was watching a video this week by Andy Stanley. Incredible video. I'm not even sure where I got it. Maybe one of you is missing it. It showed up in the office one day, and I just took it home. It's called Christian. Subtitled something like different than what you're thinking or something like that. Anyway, it's an excellent video. Anybody ever seen that? It's an excellent, excellent video. It's I think 8 or 10 of his sermons. And in one of those sermons, he is addressing his congregation, and many, many new people are there, and they have, I think, 7 or 8 different congregations in the Atlanta area, large church, 25,000 that attend the different congregations. And so he's reaching a lot of people that first-timers. They have first-timers every week. they're dealing with a lot of people that have dropped out or had dropped out of church years ago, and now they just come out of interest. But one of the things that he often, and he's very good at it, he tries to see church from a newcomer's perspective. He tries to get under their skin and see what are they thinking? How do they view us? And at one point he said, the reality is when you deal with outside people, a lot of times these outsiders or these non-Christians or non-attenders, they look at the Christian world, and here's how he said they would describe us. Here's what the word Christian in their eyes really means. Judgmental, homophobic moralists who think they are the only ones going to heaven and secretly relish the fact that everyone else is going to hell. It certainly wasn't used in the sense, and he even kind of chuckled about that, but he said, you know what, guys? It's absolutely true. There are a lot of people that look at us, and they look at us, and they never get over the hump of really learning what the story of Jesus is, because they get so lost because they have to deal with us. Listen to that again. Here's what he said a lot of outsiders would say as a Christian: a judgmental, homophobic moralists who think they are the only ones going to heaven and secretly relish the fact that everyone else is going to hell. Now remember that, because I think it has a lot of bearing in today's topic. Grab your Bibles. We find the Christmas story in what Gospels? And John. So let's turn to John. We really don't find what we call the Christmas story, but in some ways I think maybe we do find. Maybe the real message of Christmas might be introduced in the book of John better than anything else. John probably wrote this as quite an old man. We're quite sure that John wrote the last. He was the last to write his book. It's distinctly different than all the others. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, often called the synoptic gospels, because it's like they see the same. Optics is sight. Synoptic means they see the same. And so now we have John, completely different. He doesn't start in Bethlehem. He doesn't start with a genealogy. It's just like he gets right to the heart. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. And John is really trying to start completely different and really trying to get a point across. John had probably witnessed, I'm going to guess, and this isn't a guess, this is based on a lot of different theological study of other people, let's say, but John had probably witnessed 50 or 60 years of the gospel, or the truth being played out and probably being distorted at times. Think about it. If you want to distort truth, you can. It's almost like if I were to say, okay, define for me a Christian. Well, guess what? In our culture, I would guess that here in Alexandria, I know that nationwide, still about 78% or more would claim Christianity. I would say in Douglas County, and let's say all the counties that are represented here at New Life, I would guess that figure would be probably closer to about 96 or 98%. Okay? Christian. So we live in a Christian, boy, can't you see that as you walk outside? There's no crime, everyone loves it. No. How do you define Christian? It's tough. Realistically, I think Christian, the word only comes up 3 times in the Bible. Why is it that whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, regardless of what the news is, why do we have people on both sides of the fence? You take any issue just about in politics, you can find people on both sides of the fence. Why is that? Well, I think part of it has to do with how we've described Christian. You see, we can distort just about anything. Even stories, I look at even stories that Jesus used. Go back to the Sermon on the Mount. Remember where Jesus says, if someone slaps you, what are you supposed to do? Kick them? No. If they slap you in the cheek, you turn to them the other. If they take you to court and they want your shirt, what are you supposed to do? Just give them your coat too. If they want to make you walk 1 mile, walk 2. And so kind of out of that, we've derived, there's a saying, you've probably heard of it, don't judge a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes. Good teaching. Can we distort that? Well, sure we can. What happens if you do walk a mile in someone else's shoes? Well, the nice thing is, after you've done it, you've got his shoes and you've got a mile head start on him. We can distort any truth we want. And see, that's the problem. I think that's one of the problems with Christianity is we try to find out and we try to mold it, not to the life of Jesus Christ. We try to mold it to the life of John Taplin. We try to mold it to my life. And so this month especially, we're taking these topics and we're looking at them because we want to see and we want to get our thought process right so that we can start again molding it to Christ and not necessarily molding it to at least our preconceived understanding of what Christianity is. As an old man, John had witnessed the fact that Jesus' message could be distorted, especially if people were really bent on sin and not on repentance. And so John begins to craft this awesome gospel in a manner completely different than others. In the beginning was the Word. That's John's Christmas story. That's the nice thing about it. If someone says, why don't you memorize the Christmas story? Well, I'd certainly go to the book of John or Mark. Mark doesn't include it at all. He didn't start with Bethlehem. He started with creation, even prior, in the beginning. But even though John doesn't give us any details of the manger or shepherds or magi or angels, he does give us the best, I believe, the best explanation of Messiah. And even better, he gives us the heart and the passion of Messiah. Jump down to 14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Now we're even touching on next week. But we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And that is something that is so huge. So huge. Grace and truth. Skip one verse, go to 16. Out of his fullness, we have all received grace in place of grace already given. In a nutshell, what he's saying is he's referring back to the old covenant and how you kind of, in a sense, got right with God with sacrifice and with the old covenant. And now it's just like God is offering yet a new form of grace. It's grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. He's trying to get the reader to get the point. Out of the fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given, for the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. I've often wondered about that because the law really came through whom? God. It came through Moses, but it was given by God. The law was given through Moses. But then grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. We've kind of stumbled onto John's worth. John might not give us the details of the Christmas story, but he's given us its worth. Its worth is Messiah has come. The Jews couldn't come to grips with the kingdom of Jesus Christ because they were so hardened in their anticipation of what they thought Messiah was going to be. We can see it clearly, yet we have a terrible time coming to grips with it because we still live in a world of sin. You know, in many ways, we're looking at the same thing, only we have all the vision of history, yet we still struggle with it, don't we? The Jews struggled with it because they had snippets that they had to put together into their own, they had dots that they had to kind of put on the graph and try to create this picture of what Messiah was going to be. We have it all, yet we still struggle. Why? Because we still struggle with sin. We know what Messiah is. We know what Messiah wants of us. We struggle because of it. Well, that's interesting, because when you think of it, that's exactly what John is just explaining. We still struggle with it because of sin, but oh, isn't it amazing? Grace, 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 and truth. I've run out of time, but I want to leave it with this, because this is going to springboard into next week. What happens when you know the entire story of the gospel of Jesus, when you know a lot of it, when you know it all, and yet you still sin? And John is saying, here comes grace. Here comes grace. Here comes grace. But some of you have been Christians for years and years and years. Why don't you? Why aren't you perfect by now? And then comes grace and grace and grace. Well, here's where we're going to end at the end of the month. I'll kind of springboard you forward. Folks, what do we do? What do we do in a culture that right now is so bent on accepting every sinful thing around? Right now, my goodness, you walk outside this building and you can't say one bad thing about homosexuality. You can't even call homosexuality sin or you're wrong, and you're pounded. Guess what? How do we as Christians deal with that? I think the answer is we love. We love. We love. You see, the reality is, this idea, this topic of Messiah, who was the very first one that Jesus actually introduced himself and actually came forward and said he was Messiah? Would you believe it was the woman at the well? The woman at the well, chronologically, is the first one that Jesus, and here she's listening to him, and Jesus kind of pokes the question, well, how you doing? How's your married life? Oh, I'm married. No, you've been married 5 times. Grace, grace, grace. Jesus said, I don't condemn you. Remember, they were going to throw, go ahead, I don't condemn you. But what about the law? You know, when they said, Jesus, what do you say? We caught this woman in adultery. The Old Testament law says we should stone her. Well, it really didn't. It said it was supposed to stone both of them. Jesus could have said, though, wait. The Old Testament law says this, but Roman law says you can't. The other thing was, you should have, if you're going to stone them, you're going to stone them both. Remember, they caught the woman in the act of adultery. Well, apparently you caught her in the act of adultery, but you only caught half of the adulterous couple. You're supposed to stone them both. But the whole idea was, what did Jesus say? Jesus knew that he wanted to love this woman, yet here's the law. So Jesus figured out, okay, all you perfect people that have never lusted, you cast the first stone. Ooh. Folks, that's what we need to become. We uphold the law because that's truth. But realize we'll never be able to share the truth with people unless we ourselves mimic God's grace. We love people. Yeah, but they've done this. Okay, we love them. But they don't agree with us on divorce. Yes, but we love them. They don't agree this or that, or maybe they're still living, and you keep applying grace. You see, folks, that's real kingdom. That was the real difference. That was the kingdom that Jesus brought. It wasn't about a kingdom of a geographic area. It wasn't Israel. It was far more than that. It was a mentality that truth will actually come about, not by law, but it will come out by grace. It will come out by grace and the cross. That's a start. I want to just close with a word of prayer, but what are we going to sing? Away in the Manger. You guys going to come up and help out? Would we all stand? I'm going to just have a word of prayer, and then let's sing. I know we probably don't even have music for it, but let's sing Away in the Manger just to close. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the start of this month. And Lord, I pray that you will use me and whoever speaks. Father, I want this congregation to become as Christ. Lord, help us to be a congregation that truly understands what it is to love. Lord, thank you for being Messiah, but help us to understand what it truly means. That you were going to come and you were going to change it all. Not because you couldn't, but you knew the power of love. You knew the power of giving grace as a reward for sin. Father, thank you for giving us that chance and that second chance and that third chance and that 77th chance. Lord, thank you for giving us Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Can keep singing the second verse, but have a wonderful week. Focus on that. Take this sheet home. Spend some time with it. Just look up some of these prophecies and just kind of marvel at who our God is. And we'll see you next week. Have a wonderful time.